Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we are taking a look at decks for today's hot location, which is Shuri's Lab. This was a featured location back during the Black Panther season. Now it's coming back around for the hot location, and we've got some decks for all the different pools to go over for it. So taking a look at pool 1 here, we have a Zoo deck. Zoo, always a good way to go in pool 1. Pretty standard stuff here, just some good quality 1-drops. You could actually go a little bit heavier on the 1-drops if you really wanted to, with something like Borg, but we ended up going with 4 of them. Angela has some nice synergy, stuff like Nightcrawler and just all of our cheap stuff. Scarlet Witch if we want to get rid of the location, if we don't feel like we're really benefiting from it, or just one of the other locations is bad for us. Sentinel just helps us fight for the board while giving us stuff to keep on playing. Wolfsbane is nice with all our board swarm stuff going on, so it should get pretty big. Captain America buffs our lane. Obviously, Kazar and Blue Marvel, the Zoo MVPs. And then Chavez is nice for the top end and consistency, and you can make her pretty big in Shuri's Lab. Moving on to pool 2 here, we end up going with a Odin on reveal deck. So this actually uses the newly buffed Spider-Woman. I've been actually testing this card a little bit in some pool 3 decks, and I've been surprisingly impressed with it. Only one more stat than before, but pretty decent, and also can benefit with the hot location as we get to shrink all our opponent's stuff, and then 8 doubling to 16 is pretty powerful. Other than that, we just have a lot of good on reveal cards. So we have Iceman and Scorpion for some disruption, Okoye as an early game play that buffs the rest of our deck. More good on reveal stuff here with things like Star-Lord. A lot of times we'll be able to kind of guess if they're going to play into the hot location, and if we can get the buff and doubled, that's a 2 cost 10 power. It's pretty nuts. Ironheart, just good on reveal that helps spread the power around. Wolfsbane, another good on reveal here, and has good synergy with some of our cheap drops swarming the board. Killmonger for some anti-zoo tech. Jubilee has great synergy with Odin and helps us cheat out some of our bigger things ahead of curve. Shang-Chi, because we're going to be seeing a lot of big stuff going around in the Shuri's Lab, and we could actually play this early in the Shuri's Lab if we want, and then get it to go off again on the final turn with Odin. And then just White Tiger and Spider-Woman for some more high-value, good Odin targets. Moving on to pool 3 and above here, starting out with a Electro ramp deck featuring Black Panther. And we do have Shuri in here because Shuri has a lot of nice synergy with the stuff we're playing, but you could also probably get around playing with Shuri and just go with another big 6-drop instead for the top end, like Magneto or something. But I like Shuri because worst case, we can kind of just do the Black Panther combo sometimes, with Shuri pumping him up, and then Zola to put him into 2 other lanes and get another doubling effect. Other than that, it's a pretty standard ramp deck. We do have Electro and Wave here as our 2 made ramp pieces. You could also try and find Jubilee, space for Jubilee. Maybe that would be your Shuri replacement if you don't have her, as that is good Odin synergy and helps act as pseudo ramp for cheating stuff out ahead of time. Ebony Maw is nice on Shuri's Lab, and we can always get some stuff in that lane later with things like Dr. Doom. Sunspot obviously is good when we're going to be passing a lot in the early game. Electro gives us the ramp as well as Wave. Leech turns off all of our opponent's good stuff. Panther for the obvious synergy with the lab and the Zola combo stuff. Arrow to just kind of interact with our opponent's stuff. Vision is nice because we can get the Shuri's Lab buff and then move it around to somewhere else. Zola for the combo shenanigans. Doom just to spread the power around, and Odin for the synergy with all our other on reveals. Next up here, we have a deck that I featured on the channel relatively recently, and that is the Quake Control deck. This one's really sweet because when people are going to be playing into a specific location like Shuri's Lab, the fact that we can kind of just shuffle the locations around can be a pretty big benefit for us. Also just a very good control deck, which I think is going to be good in response to people just trying to slam big stats, as obviously we have Shang-Chi here to help deal with it. Captain Marvel, pretty nice with the buff, getting her to move elsewhere on the final turn with a +12, is good. She-Hulk, also good with the buff. Shuri, just a ridiculous card in general and has some very cool interactions with this deck, like enabling a big Captain Marvel, big She-Hulk, all that kind of stuff. Storm helps us lock down a lane early on in the game, and then we can play into it later if need be with things like Doom or our Captain Marvel, Enchantress for some more control elements, Scarlet Witch to get rid of a bad location, Zabu to make our tech cards here cheaper, as well as Shuri, and then Sunspot just because really good in any kind of Storm deck and decks where we might be loading some mana during the early game turns. Next up, we have what I think is the best deck in the game, and that is Thanos. So I went over this in my recent best decks from the February season video the other night. But yeah, Thanos, widely regarded as the best deck in the game. There are a lot of different variations of Thanos going around, but this is the one I like. Most of this deck is very core. You're not cutting most of these cards, but you do have a few flex slots here, those mainly being the Blue Marvel slot as well as the Arrow slot. Because Arrow actually a little bit worse than she used to be purely because of so many Thanos decks running around, where moving stuff with her isn't actually always super beneficial. But yeah, Arrow definitely still a good card, but one of the flex slots for this deck. Seen a lot of different stuff in this deck. Some people tried Doom. I mean, you could really run a wide variety of cards in either of these two slots. I do think the rest of the deck is pretty core. Magneto is one of the other slots that some people try out different stuff in place of, but I have really liked this card. Sometimes just surprising people by moving stuff around is very, very useful, and obviously gets a pretty big boost from the Shuri's Lab. Vision could definitely be a good inclusion for this hot location as well, though, as you can kind of pump it up real big and then move it elsewhere. You don't have to worry about it getting Shang-Chi'd, and obviously Shang-Chi going to be very, very good and should probably be in most of your decks for this hot location. Next deck we have here is a pretty standard good stuff pile with just a very high quality of good cards. Now we are running Kang in this version. Kang is by no means required, but I really liked him in this deck. However, if you don't have Kang, I would probably just put another good 5-drop in his place, such as Vision, or maybe try out the newly buffed Spider-Woman if you don't have him. But the rest of this deck is all pool 3 or below cards, and I think we'll still be really solid without him. Just a lot of the really good early game here in Sunspot, Iceman, Scorpion, Lizard, and some powerful mid-game cards. Mr. Fantastic for spreading the power around. Polaris can be very, very good against the Thanos decks, just kind of unexpectedly locking out their lane, or maybe closing out the Shuri's Lab lane before they are ready for it. Shang-Chi as our best interaction tool. White Queen for just good power and some additional information. Arrow because she's Arrow. Doom to spread the power around, and She-Hulk because she's a really good big card and has nice synergy with Sunspot. Another deck that I think will do really well for this one is Deadpool. I played this the other week on stream, and I really love this deck. This is Specimen's List, and it's been the most fun Deadpool and kind of effective Deadpool list that I've played in a while. Now, one substitution that I know a lot of people ask about is Bast, since that's really the only pool 4 card we have in here. If you don't have Bast, you could run Hulkbuster or the Hood in its place and still be pretty effective with the deck, but definitely run this if you have it. But Deadpool really benefits from Shuri's Lab, as we want to be blowing him up to double him over and over again, so the fact that we can double before we double him again is very, very good. Other than that, we just have a bunch of ways to make our Deadpool bigger with Nova and Forge. Beast is cool because if you bounce your Deadpool, it stays at 0 cost for the rest of the game, which can be very relevant. Then we need some ways to destroy the Deadpool, so we have Carnage, Venom, Killmonger, and Deathlock. Wolverine has obvious synergy with the destroy effects. Taskmaster to copy our big Deadpool on the final turn usually, and then Chavez for some more deck consistency. And then last but not least, we wouldn't be making use of Shuri's Lab, right, if we didn't have a Shuri focused deck in the video. You really don't need to tech this one to the location very much. I guess if you wanted to get real cheeky with it, you could try and find space for a Shang-Chi in this list, but I do think the Shuri list always really benefits from just trying to be a proactive deck rather than a reactive one, so I don't think that's really necessary. But this is a pretty stock Shuri list. This is the one that I featured in my recent deck video as well about the best decks for the most recent season of Snap. And there's really not too much to say here. I mean, If you've played against Shuri once, you feel like you've played against it 1,000 times. It's always doing the same kind of stuff. You really just want to get your Shuri on 4 into hopefully a Red Skull on 5, or sometimes a She-Hulk or Arrow. Then copy your big thing with the Taskmaster, or blow up your big thing with Zola to get 2 more copies. Then we just have some solid cards here for the early game, such as Sunspot, Zero to turn off our negative effects on things like Titania, Lizard, and Red Skull, and then just some very powerful protection for our big things in Armor and Cosmo. But those are all the decks for our Shuri's Lab hot location, and that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.